All right, we're going to get started in just a minute. Welcome to the LionSide Chat. If you want to double check your audio's good to go, we will get started here in just a little bit. All right, welcome to Penn State Berks LionSide Chats. Come on in and welcome to our campus. We're so glad that you could join us today. My name is Dr. Ryan Hassler. I am one of 3 LionSide Chat moderators working alongside Don Pfeiffer-Wrights and Sonia De La Cueto. Before we get started, we wanted to share that you should please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A feature during this webinar. We will not be utilizing the raise hand feature or the chat box. So as you do ask questions, please throw those into the Q&A feature. Today's chat is actually the first part of a 6-part series on our Penn State values. We are going to kick it off today with the value of integrity. Once our presentation concludes, I will facilitate a discussion with the panelist or with our presenter about the Q&As that you put into the chat box. So with that, I am excited to announce that our speaker today is Dr. Jennifer Eury. So welcome, Dr. Eury. Dr. Eury is a clinical assistant professor of management and organization in the Penn State Schmiel College of Business, and she's also an affiliate with the Rock Ethics Institute at Penn State. You can see her vast, amazing resume here on the screen, but prior to being a professor of management, she served as Schmiel's Honors and Integrity Director, so she might know a little bit about integrity, so that's why we're excited to have her here. She is a 4-time Penn State alum, so that means she has 4 Penn State degrees and is also a proud alum of the Penn State Lionettes dance team. So thank you so much for joining us to chat about the first of the 6 values, integrity. So I will welcome you to share, and I look forward to the chat.
Great, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see this okay? I guess, Ryan, can you see this on your end?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, fabulous. Well, once again, thank you for that very nice welcome. It's really wonderful to be here today and really to talk with you about a very important topic as shared Penn Staters. So many of you here today are incoming first-year students at Penn State or currently Penn State students. So welcome. I hope you're doing well, and I'm very excited for all of you to be a part of the Penn State family. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I will go through some slides and some scenarios and some comments here, and then we'll open it up for some questions as we near the end of our time together today. So as we saw when you first joined us, there are 6 Penn State values. You will hear more about each of these values over the course of this webinar series. Today, we're going to focus specifically on integrity, but again, the other values are also respect, responsibility, discovery, excellence, and community. As you will find, many companies and other organizations have a set of shared values. You might see them on their websites, you might see them in their brochures, you might even see them posted on their walls when you walk into their office spaces. You might see the values written in different places. That really speaks to the sense to which an organization really does embrace the values. When you see them talking about them and thinking about them and actually see them visually, it really speaks to the sense of how much they embrace them. And so here at Penn State, we truly do embrace our 6 core values, and these are our shared values. So today we're going to focus on integrity. So I thought it might be helpful to share with you how we are defining integrity here at Penn State. There are respective definitions for each of our values, but again, focusing on integrity today. And it reads, we act with integrity and honesty in accordance with the highest academic, professional, and ethical standards. So we really think about integrity in all aspects of our life, and in particularly the way in which we engage with Penn State and our Penn State community. So today, as first-year college students or incoming college students, I want to talk with you about what it means to act with integrity in a variety of aspects of what it's like to be a college student. As a student, you will, of course, engage in your academic coursework, right? You will go to class, you will complete assignments and deliverables, and and earn a grade, right? You will likely participate in student organizations. We encourage our students to participate in student organizations. You may have 1 or 2 or 3 or more during the course of your time at Penn State that you were involved with. We, of course, encourage our students to pursue internships and eventually a full-time job after graduating from Penn State. And so throughout that process, you will likely engage in a series of networking events and, of course, the interview process. And so that's an important part as well where integrity shows up. And finally, again, I referenced internships. So when you are perhaps between your sophomore and junior years or junior and senior years, you may complete an internship. And that internship is another important place where you should be acting with integrity. So this is not comprehensive in that there are surely other aspects of your college experience where integrity shows up, but I thought I'd highlight 4 key areas. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. So first, let's talk about coursework. So in the classroom, integrity, oftentimes referred to as academic integrity, is incredibly important. And what I'd like to do here is give you some sort of tips in terms of how to act with integrity with respect to your coursework and in the classroom itself. First, build rapport with your instructors. And in some of your classes, you might have TAs or teaching assistants is what we call them. This is incredibly important. What do I mean by building rapport? Well, taking time to get to know who your instructors are, taking time to get to know who your TAs are. What are their backgrounds? What are their experiences? What are their interests? Establish a relationship with these individuals. Give them an opportunity to get to know you. What are your interest areas? What are you excited about with respect to the course that you're taking with them? Establishing that relationship provides you really with a solid foundation as you move forward in that course. Should you have a problem, should you have a question, it's much easier to bring those concerns or questions forward when you feel like you know the other person, right? Besides just the person in the front of the classroom, you actually have taken time to shake their hand or look them in the eyes and really have a conversation getting to know each other. So this moves me to my second point about when in doubt, ask. Again, if you have a rapport with your instructors or your TAs, you are going to feel much more comfortable having a conversation with your instructor about an assignment. If there's something that's not clear to you, that you can ask them for clarification. Same thing with your TAs. So how does this relate to integrity or academic integrity? Well, oftentimes there are situations where you might receive an assignment with details on how to go about doing it. But you might hear your classmates talking about one way to do it. You might have your sort of idea of here's how to do it. Here's how I thought I heard the instructor explain it. And there might be some perhaps miscommunications or in need of clarification. And so asking your instructor, for example, is this homework assignment something where we are allowed to work with our classmates on these homework problems? Can we work with our classmates on these problems? Or do you want us to complete these homework assignments on our own? That's an incredibly important question to ask because not doing so and maybe doing something that's not intended. So your instructor intended for you to do these assignments on your own and you end up doing them with your classmates, that could be potentially classified as cheating, right? Because you're supposed to be doing it on your own. So getting that clarification from the beginning can avoid that issue. Let me give you another example. Maybe you have a take-home quiz or a take-home test or an exam, and you have maybe 24 hours to complete it. You might ask your instructor, is this an open book, open note quiz? What resources, if any, can I use to complete this quiz, test, or exam? Again, can I collaborate? Meaning, can I work with someone else while taking this or not? Getting clarification around an assignment, around a deliverable, can ensure that you are maintaining what we call academic integrity, being honest in the work that you do in your coursework in the classroom. Finally, related to really the second point, when in doubt, ask, is also using the resources that you have available to you. Of course, your instructors and TAs can help clarify assignments for you. But let's say you have a writing assignment in one of your classes and you are required to use some outside sources. Well, of course, if you're using outside sources, all of the ideas in your paper are not necessarily coming from you. So you need to give credit, give attribution to the authors for whose ideas you're including in your paper. So we'd use something called citations. And there are different types of citations, APA, MLA. Sometimes your instructor may have a preference. Sometimes they may say, hey, as long as you include your citations and give credit where credit is due, that's what's most important. So you can get some clarification on that as well. But if it's the first time you're doing something like this and you've never used citations before, that can be a bit daunting. You surely do not want to simply copy and paste something from a website and put it into your paper. That's where we go down the line of something called plagiarism, which again is not acting with integrity. So what do you do? How do you use your resources? Well, if you go to the Penn State Library's website, they have a section right on their website, it's kind of towards the bottom of the page, that will give you some insights on how to do proper citations. If you search Purdue University's online writing lab, we call it the Purdue OWL for short. It's an open access resource. It's another really handy resource as well that can be helpful for a variety of writing resources, but also specifically related to citations. Sometimes you might explore your on-campus writing center or tutoring services, or again, going to the TA if you have questions about how to formulate your ideas so that they're different from what's in the already documented sources, so that you're adding value. So my point here is that realizing when you receive an assignment, you're not on your own to figure everything out. If you've established a relationship with your instructors and your TAs, you have a foundation where you can go to them and ask for clarification, ask for help if you need it. If you're running into a deadline issue, if you're running into you're struggling with an assignment, these are all important conversations to have as soon as you run into these issues, right? And then of course, the additional resources that are available to you outside of the classroom. An important part of integrity as it relates to coursework that you will find here at Penn State has to do with group projects. Not every single deliverable that you do here at Penn State will be an individual assignment. From time to time, perhaps as you did in high school, you will have the opportunity to work with your classmates on an assignment, maybe in a group of 2 people, maybe 4 people, 5 people. And so I want to share with you some ways to act with integrity with respect to these group projects in the context of your coursework. So my first advice is to establish basic ground rules. You may find that in your classes, your instructors may ask you to put together a team pact or a team contract. Even if that's not required, I encourage you to spend some time talking with your team. Sometimes you get to choose your teammates, sometimes you don't, but with your teammates, talking about things like, how often are you going to meet? Where are you going to meet? How often are you going to communicate with each other? What is the expectation that when somebody sends a message in GroupMe or somebody sends an email that you need to respond? Is it within 24 hours? Is it within 4 hours? What happens if somebody's not responding to messages? What are you going to do in terms of ensuring that everybody's voice is heard with respect to creating your ideas around the project? If somebody's voice is not being heard, how will you ensure that they feel like they're a part of the group? What happens if somebody's not coming to meetings or not responding to internal sort of due dates that your team sets for itself? These are all really, really important issues to talk about. And again, if you talk about these scenarios and sort of establish some basic ground rules from the very beginning, you are truly setting your group up for success. The second key point is to hold each other accountable. Again, assuming that you've taken time from the very beginning to have a conversation, and it can be a 30-minute conversation. I'm not suggesting you spend hours on this, right? But you can have a short but very pointed, candid conversation about how your group is going to function. Assuming you do that and you have a process in place, it's important to stick to it, right? Keep your word, honor your word. This is what we mean when we talk about acting with integrity. If you say that you are going to respond to emails or GroupMe messages or honor your internal deadlines by certain dates or times, it's important that you actually do that, right? That you follow through on that. That's what we're talking about when we say be accountable. You're keeping your word for yourself and you're keeping your word to your group, especially with respect to the team contract or team pact that you established. And finally, most importantly, and this is a lesson, an advice that will surely serve you well if you embrace it, both in college, in all aspects of your life, in the classroom, as well as with your friend group or personal relationships, but also in the professional workplace, is be open and honest. If you're working on a group project and you're really struggling with your part of the project, or you're running into an issue where you're not going to be able to get something to the group by a certain time frame, don't just let it be, a black hole, right, where no one hears from you. Communicate. Be open and honest that you are running into problems or that you need help or whatever it might be. You will be surprised how much empathy people have to work with you if you are open and honest and communicate as soon as you know that you have a problem or as soon as you know that there's an issue. And that is incredibly important with your group projects when we talk about acting with integrity. And you'll see as we talk more about this today, it will serve you well in other aspects of your time at Penn State, as well as in the professional workplace. So I talked with you about some tips and sort of ideas in terms of how to act with integrity with respect to your coursework. I want to give you some very concrete scenarios. These are scenarios that absolutely have happened to college students here at Penn State, and perhaps maybe scenarios you find yourself in at some point as well. So the first one goes as follows. A professor asks you to interview your role model and write a short essay. You completed a similar assignment last year in high school. So you might think to yourself, well, can I just maybe use the essay I wrote last year for this assignment? Or maybe if I just tweak it a little bit, make a few little changes, it'll be okay. Well, as I present these scenarios here, we could have a 30-minute discussion around this scenario, right? Each of you probably have different thoughts around this. Some of you may say, I wouldn't have even thought about that. Some of you said, yeah, I would totally do it, right? There's all different thoughts around this. And so I encourage you, those of you who are here, maybe for a class or for a special program that you're a part of, maybe these are scenarios that you could go back and think about and talk about even with a collective group. I would encourage you here, and sort of the punchline here to think about is, it may be really easy just to kind of go with what you think you can do or should do or can do and get away with it. But I encourage you again to go back to those tips I just shared. One of those points about establishing a relationship with your instructors and being open and honest with your group members, right? They kind of go together. If you have a question, when in doubt, ask, right? These are all kind of going together in this scenario. When in doubt, ask. Why not just go to your professor and share this scenario and say, what do you advise that I do? What are my options? Your professor might very well say, you know what? It's great that you've already interviewed this person, but I'd like for you to take your assignment in a different way, or like take your essay in a different angle. Or your professor might say, I appreciate the fact that you've already completed something like this, but I'd like for you to do this again, conduct a new interview with another role model and write a different essay. You never know what their responses might be. So it's really important, again, given what the learning objectives are for the course, it's important to get that clarification. What you don't want to do is do something that is not permitted, right? And then find yourself in an academic integrity situation. Okay, let me give you another scenario. You're part of a group project with 3 other classmates. Unfortunately, one of your group members has not participated in the project. So you might think to yourself, especially as you're getting closer to that deadline, well, should we still put their name on the project? It may be very tempting. Again, a really good scenario for you to kind of think about and talk about maybe with some of your classmates or individuals within your program. It may be very tempting to say, oh, I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to seem like the bad person. I'm just going to go ahead and put their name on the project. Then you have to stop and think about, well, is that really fair? Is that fair to your whole group? You've all completed the assignment. They haven't completed the assignment. You're both going to end up with the same grade. Is that appropriate? You also have to think about the fact that, how are you helping that person be successful? Here at Penn State, we want each other to be successful. How are you helping that person to be successful in the long term? In the long term, for their next group assignment, or maybe for the group assignment they're doing in another class at that same time. You're not really helping them, right? You're sort of enabling the bad behaviors. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't a reason why they're having a difficult time and can't contribute, right? That's why communication is so important in a group project. But when we look at this scenario and it's a short vignette, it really does raise the question, is that really fair? Is that really fair? Is that acting with integrity on both parts to move forward in this fight? So again, lots to really think about with respect to these scenarios. And we can talk more about these if you have questions or want to talk through them. Even in this session, we can talk through them at the end of our session today too. Okay, our second key area is student organizations. And again, I encourage you to find your interest areas, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, and get involved on campus in student orgs that allow you to continue to do what you enjoy. So with respect to acting with integrity, again, common theme here, building rapport with the individuals within your network is incredibly important from a professionalism standpoint, and again, helping you build that foundation for when, if and when there is a problem in the future, you have a place to begin. So build a rapport with the executive board. That's the leadership of your student organization, as well as your organization advisor. You'll find that some of your advisors may be very involved. They may come to your meetings, they may come to your special events, or they may not. They may kind of be available as you need them, right? As the organization needs them. Either way, I encourage you to seek out your organization advisor, introduce yourself, share your interests, and learn a little bit about who they are and what their role is with respect to your organization. Secondly, as a member of a student org, I strongly encourage you to share your ethical concerns. If you are sitting in one of your organization meetings and you're watching, I'm just going to give you a couple scenarios. You know, you're watching the president or one of the leaders within the org sort of respond in a snippy, maybe disrespectful way to a member within the organization. Or maybe you see one of your members treating one of the leaders in a disrespectful way. Maybe there's a decision being made in the organization that you believe sort of violates what Penn State stands for. It runs against sort of our core values, the 6 core values. If you've established a relationship with your executive board and your organization advisor, it's going to be much easier to have that type of conversation where you can feel more comfortable. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Having courage is not easy, right? You may be shaking in your boots and still having courage, right? But you can have that difficult conversation. You can act on your values. You can share your voice, raise your voice, because you have a relationship to do that, right? So be open to sharing that you will help make the organization better if you raise concerns that are going to help the organization act in a more be more respecting of its leaders and its members, and of course, do things in a fair and honest way. Finally, I want to really highlight this last point, and this is incredibly important. Basically, honor your commitments. When you say you're going to do something, do it. That is being honest, that is keeping your word, that's acting with integrity. So again, in the context of your student organizations, you've signed up to be a part of this organization. You may have paid dues to be a part of this organization. So if there are organization meetings, make every effort to be at those meetings. If you can't be at a meeting, let your leaders know, right? Be honest, communicate, just as you would in the workplace. If you're not going to show up to work, it's important that you let your manager know what's going on, right? What else with respect to honoring your commitments? Oftentimes in your student orgs, you will have opportunities to be a part of maybe a subcommittee or a task force, or work on a special project, or sign up for a shift to volunteer at an event, for example. If you sign up for something, if you say you're going to do something, it's important to honor your commitments. That said, we know life happens. We know things, gosh, we all know what's happened in the last year, right? Life happens. So if that happens, it's important to communicate. If you get sick and can't do something, if you've got a family emergency, you can't do something, the key is honoring your commitments is also, letting the people who know, who are organizing the event or are sort of, responsible here, informed of why you can't do something. Key is be honest and honor your commitments to what you've made to your organization. Now, my hope is, and I trust that many of you will, as you get involved here at Penn State, find ways to also take on leadership positions. So I did want to say a couple of words with respect to how to act with integrity once you do take on a leadership role within your organization. And the first and foremost, again, above all, is to lead by example. We know that in business, for example, we know that CEOs and the top leadership teams set the tone in the organization. Similarly, in your student orgs, as a leader, you also set the tone, right? So if you bring positive energy and you act with integrity and you're fair in your processes and procedures and communicate with your membership, it's very likely that they will also follow suit. Which brings me to my next point, which is related. Just as I had said in my previous slide about, bring forward your issues or concerns if you have them. As a leader, you want to create an environment where people feel like they can bring their ideas or concerns forward. And one way to do that is by also openly sharing your ideas and concerns with the group. So for example, I'm familiar with some organizations that will start every organization meeting with a values moment. They will take one of their core values for the organization and talk about how one of their members really sort of lived out that core value. Or, it could be anything like that. That's just one example, right? But by doing so, you start to sort of show your members that you're open to having these difficult conversations. You're open to promoting integrity in your processes and procedures as a leader within the organization. And finally, this is really important too. It's fun and important. People want to be rewarded and recognized for doing good work, right? We know that sometimes going above and beyond to do the right thing, meaning if everybody else is saying this and you think this and you sort of bring an idea forward, maybe not publicly in the group meeting, but maybe you bring the idea forward, go and talk with the president of your organization, or somebody has come to you as the president of the organization and talked to you about one of their ideas. And it's really a good idea. And it's really where the organization needs to go in terms of promoting integrity and acting with honesty. You might then recognize that member. Now, you might do that privately. You might send them an email just saying, hey, thank you so much for speaking up and coming to me and sharing your concerns with me. Because of what you've shared with me, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. That is one way to recognize your members. Some organizations have a formal awards program. There's all sorts of titles depending on whatever your organization is involved with. But I will tell you, a well-known organization, a well-known company has one as part of their annual awards program is the Integrity Award. The Integrity Award is given by the CEO of the company. It's more important than the number of sales you've had or the number of years of service you've been with the organization, but it's someone who's gone above and beyond to do the right thing when really it was incredibly tough. And that individual showed a ton of courage to do so. So I encourage you to be creative, think about ways either privately or publicly to think about how you can recognize and reinforce that positive behavior that your members might exhibit so that you can see more of that within your organization. So again, I want to give you a quick scenario. Again, here's how acting with integrity can play out again in one of your organizations. You learned from a friend that the treasurer of your student organization borrowed proceeds from a recent fundraiser to pay for their rent last month. You with me on this? Borrowed. What we're really talking about is that what you're hearing from a friend is that your treasurer stole money from your student organization, unfortunately a fundraiser, and is using it for their own personal gain. Okay, that's really what we're talking about here. So the question here is, what do you do with this information, right? What can you do to act with integrity in accordance with the highest ethical standards? It can be very, very tempting to just pretend you didn't hear this, maybe say this may or may not be true. Again, if you've got a solid relationship with your leadership and your organizational advisor, they are very helpful sounding boards with respect to working through this type of scenario. Again, we can kind of work through this a bit more at the end, or again, this can be something you can kind of work through offline as well. There's a lot here to kind of chew on. I get that. But I encourage you to, again, the underlying message here is to think about What would it mean to act with integrity in this situation, right? Act with integrity. Having integrity and acting with integrity is not always easy. And it may not be the most popular thing to do because not everybody else is doing it, right? There's a saying that says, integrity is doing what is right when nobody's watching, right? That's what we're talking about here. And these can be very difficult scenarios. The more practice you have with these types of scenarios in college, the more likely you will be prepared to face undoubtedly the wide range of scenarios and ethical challenges that you will experience in the workplace. The third point, speaking of workplace, is the interview process. So the interview process could very well be related to interviewing for a position within your student org, but I'm thinking about this really in the context of interviewing for an internship or a full-time job eventually. So with respect to the interview process, again, I have a few tips to kind of help you think about how to act with integrity in this part of your college experience. So first of all, this seems so basic. It seems very simple and straightforward, but you would be surprised. Be honest from start to finish. Be honest in your resume, right? If you're including your GPA, be honest with your GPA. You'd be surprised that unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case. And let's just say that didn't end well for the student with respect to that internship opportunity. Be honest in how you respond to questions during the interview process. If you don't know an answer, don't make something up, right? If you really have no idea about something, again, be honest. You can share what you know, and you can also offer to follow up after the interview if there's something in particular they're asking you about that you need to kind of gather some more information on. But most of the times the questions you're getting in an interview are about scenarios that you've experienced. They're about your own experiences. So, they're yours. So you own them. And so be honest about them. Secondly, and also related to the first point, is being professional, and being professional in every way possible, right? Being professional in terms of being on time to the interview, being professional in terms of, what you're wearing and how you present yourself, being professional, of course, with respect to how you respond to questions. It's possible that you could get a question. You might have a recruiter who is a Penn State alum, or is somewhat connected to something that you have on your resume based on a previous internship you've had, and they make an offhanded comment, or they ask you something that isn't really relevant to the interview process or maybe inappropriate. It's important to find a way to get that interview back on track and to maintain your professionalism through that. You could say, well, I appreciate those comments. I'd like to share with you more about how I did this in addressing this situation. You're trying to keep the interview back on focus. Hopefully that will not be an issue. But again, being professional is really, is being professional throughout the entire process. Even if you do kind of get caught off guard on something, still try to be calm and be professional. And finally, this is incredibly important. I say to my students all the time, ask questions. And you even heard it earlier. I said, when in doubt, ask, right? That's with respect to the coursework. In the interview, same thing. The interviewer or the panel will ask you questions. They're trying to determine if you're a good fit, if you have the skills and abilities and experience that fit with their organization. It's also important that you do the same, that you interview them as well. So typically, almost always at the end of an interview, the interviewer will say, what questions do you have for us? Always have a set of questions ready. I'm going to share with you some types of questions that you might want to ask that aren't necessarily about the job you might have, or the internship. You might have some of those. This is specifically about integrity. Will this be an environment where you will thrive because they also uphold the values, the shared values that we have here at Penn State? So for example, you might say something like, I understand the company's values are X, Y, and Z, diversity, respect, and excellence, for example. How do you see them implemented? You'd be surprised. I once had a student share with me that they asked the interviewer about the company's values, and it was sort of a blank stare on the other end. And I said, well, that's telling. That's telling that although the organization may have values, they may or may not actually live them, act with them, implement them on a day-to-day basis, right? So asking that information can be very helpful. You've done a little bit of homework by finding out what the values are. Now you're asking about how they're implemented. You might also say, who are the company's role models and heroes? What values do they represent? Again, it gives you some insights in terms of who works at the organization and what people admire or think about with respect to why those individuals are role models or heroes. Next, and lastly, I want to add here, how are interns or new hires and managers oriented to the values of the company in orientation programs? Are they trained in ethical decision-making? That's important to know. Will you be working with other people who have gone through some orientation process around the shared values? Does your manager have some training with respect to coaching and mentoring on ethical issues? Are they trained in ethical decision-making? This can be a very useful set of responses that you could gain and help you to decide if that internship or more, probably most importantly, company is the right fit for you on a long-term basis for a full-time job. Similarly, you should be prepared that, as I shared, of course, the interviewer is going to ask you questions. They too are not only interested in your skills and abilities and experiences, but they also want to see, are you going to be a good values fit with your organization? So be prepared. The interviewer may ask you some questions, and the questions may go like this. Please provide an example of an ethical decision you made at school or at work, maybe a part-time job, for example, and tell how you handled it. What factors did you consider? Here's another one. Can you describe your current student organization's ethics? Are there things you feel good about or bad about? And finally, have you ever observed someone else stretching the rules at school or at work? What did you do, if anything? Now, these questions are not they're not simple questions. They're not questions where you can just make up an answer. Because if you're making up an answer, the interviewer will clearly get that sense. These are questions that truly get at your integrity, your commitment to being honest and to standing by the highest ethical standards. And so I encourage you to be thoughtful and to think about these types of questions. I know this session is recorded, so you're welcome to kind of go back and think about this, but think about it. How would you respond if somebody asked you one of these questions? What would you say? And so I encourage you, again, to be thinking about not only what you can ask the recruiter or the interviewer, but also what they may ask of you with respect to hiring for integrity. Lastly, I want to touch on the topic of internships, an incredibly important topic, especially since so many of you are thinking about what you're going to do after Penn State, although that seems so far from now, especially for those of you who are incoming students. You'll be surprised. Take it from me, a four-time alum, your time at Penn State goes by very, very quickly. So you want to make the most of it. Some of you will have an internship, 1 or 2 or 3 internships during your time here at Penn State. So when you go on these internships, some of them may be virtual, some of them may be in person, some of them may be hybrid. Regardless, when you're on these internships, I'd like to share with you some tips for how to act with integrity in these different environments. Again, a very common theme here, building rapport, taking time to get to know your manager, understand how your manager wants how you're going to communicate with each other. Are you going to have daily meetings? Are you going to have weekly meetings? Do they prefer text or sometime or phone call? Do they prefer you just stopping into their office, just popping in their door? Is there a sort of a inter-office instant messaging where you communicate with each other? How does your manager want to communicate? What happens when you run into a problem? Getting to know your manager and their style and their personality can help you very, very much so. Again, when you're working through your internship, just in general, working through your responsibilities, but of course, when you're dealing with a difficult problem or run into a problem, you can more easily and more importantly, more comfortably talk with them about that issue. Secondly, learning the organizational culture. This is one of the great benefits of an internship. You actually get to spend time with people in the organization or at the organization. And you can start to see maybe this is a place where you want to work after graduating from Penn State, or maybe it's not. But learning the organization culture is about learning how decisions get made, learning who some of the key players are in the organization and a bit about them, getting to know people within your network. All of this is incredibly important besides the nuts and bolts of what the company does. It's how the company or the organization functions. You know, how do they interact with each other? How do they interact with clients or suppliers or whoever, you know, whatever stakeholders might be relevant in that particular case. Finally, we are all human. And in your professional workplace, when you graduate, you will make mistakes, and you will surely make mistakes on your internships, and that is okay. But what is important is that you again act with integrity when you make a mistake. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you make a mistake, or if you're finding that you're going to make a mistake, I mean, you're not going to make a deadline, or you know, you miscalculated something, whatever it might be, right? You admit to it, and you apologize, and not just say I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, and I recognize that this is an issue, and here's what I'm going to do in the future, or so that this doesn't happen again, or I'm going to make every effort to not have this happen again. Or this could be a learning opportunity for you where you realize, you know, I just don't know how to do this part of my tasks that I'm being asked to do. And so this is where I need some help. This is where I need some resources. So this part can be this, you know, turning point can be very, very helpful to admit to it, to have a discussion. Again, if you build rapport with your manager, it's way easier or more comfortable, you should be more comfortable to be able to have sometimes these difficult situations and work through them. If you haven't really spent time getting to know your manager, it's, gosh, you feel like this is my first impression, right? Messing up and this is what we've got. So get to know your manager from the beginning, figure out work styles and what's going to work best, understand the culture of the organization. And when you make a mistake, figure out how you're going to make it right. Take some ownership for it, apologize and move on. Okay, that's really, really important. And just realize that's part of the internship experience. Okay, here is a sample scenario where acting with integrity can be, again, can kind of be put to the test, right? Your best friend asks you to join their family at the beach during the last week of your internship. Your friend suggests that you just tell your manager you need to leave the internship a week early due to a family obligation. Again, it can be incredibly tempting, especially if you've been going to your internship every single day. I know one of the internships I had, I would get there 8 in the morning and I would leave at 7:30 at night, get home, have dinner, a late dinner, and go to bed and get up and do it all the next day. And it's a lot. And so this can be very, very tempting. But I encourage you to think about the commitment. Going back, even my comments with your student organizations, honoring your commitments. Think about the commitment that you made to your manager, to your internship, to your place of employment. And think about what you can do to act with integrity in accordance with the highest professional standards. So these are the 4 areas that we've talked about today: coursework, student orgs, interview process, and internship. These are all areas where you can act with integrity. I encourage you to act with integrity. I hope that my comments have provided you with some tips and ideas for how exactly to do that in a very practical way. When you are faced with an ethical challenge, I want to share with you some guiding questions, some things that you can think about to sort of expand your question thinking, expand your thought process. And they are as follows. When you're faced with a difficult situation, think about what decision or action would produce the greatest good and the least harm for the most people overall. Think about it. When you're faced with a difficult situation, what kind of world would it be if everybody behaved in this way? Would I want to live in that world? Or we call this the disclosure rule. What would everybody else think about your decision if it showed up on your campus newspaper or in the New York Times or somewhere on social media? How would you feel about that? Good or bad? Lastly, what would your ethical role model say or expect for you to do? Who's that person in your life who you talk to about your problems, your concerns, and you just don't want to let them down? And they'll tell it to you straight, right? They'll tell you what you should do. And that's what we're talking about here with respect to that particular point. So they are some guiding questions that hopefully can help you continue to work through some ethical challenges that you might experience here at Penn State and moving forward. So at this time, I'm going to wrap up, and I want to thank you for your time, for being here today, and entertain any questions that you might have. And whatever questions we don't get to here today, feel free to send me an email. Happy to connect with you that way, and also happy to set up a Zoom or a phone call, and we can connect one-on-one as well. Ryan?
Thank you so much, Dr. Eury. At this point, I'll invite any of the audience members to go ahead and use the Q&A feature, and I will facilitate a conversation with our presenter here with any questions. I will kick this off by saying, with many of our attendees here coming from high school, can you just maybe, I've heard it said, in high school, maybe I fabricated something, maybe I plagiarized a little bit. And when I pose this to freshmen, they usually say to me, and I kind of got a slap on the hand, or I had one bad experience. Can you just kind of maybe talk about the process of what an academic integrity violation or an academic integrity policy process looks like here at Penn State?
Sure, very good. Again, we have these core values here at Penn State, and we take them very seriously. They really define who we are as a community. And with respect to integrity and academic integrity, again, we think about this in the context of the classroom. So if, for example, you are in a situation where your instructor believes that you may have plagiarized something for an assignment. You may have copied and pasted something from a website, you put it into your paper, you thought you changed things around, but you didn't. There are no citations. Or maybe you were caught cheating on a test or a quiz. Or maybe you worked on an assignment and it was supposed to be an assignment that you were to do on your own, but instead you collaborated with someone. And what would happen here is your instructor would likely contact you and ask for a meeting. And your instructor would ask for, why do you think we're having this conversation? And ask for your side of the story, and then reveal sort of their observations. And from that point, usually, again, from my own experiences, would present a student with something called what we call an academic integrity form. And the form would be something where it would have a academic integrity violation and proposed sanction. I like to refer to it as the appropriate educational outcome for what has just transpired. And it may be, for example, a 10% deduction. It could be a 0 on an assignment. It could be more extreme, right? There could be recommendations to refer to student affairs, depending on how egregious the situation is. And at that point in the process, the student and the instructor have to decide, did this really happen? And if so, do you agree to the appropriate educational outcome, the appropriate sanction? And assuming that happens, both parties sign the form, and that's sort of the end of it at that point. Of course, if it happens again during your time here at Penn State, that information of course is on file with the university, and there could be more sanctions to come as a result of that. But as an instructor and a student, it really is handled, as part of the educational learning process. We as the instructors, we don't like these conversations. We don't want you to have this situation. So we try to provide you with the resources to avoid it. But it's very serious, and we do address it when it happens, and there are consequences for what happens.
Great. Yeah. I mean, there's a process, right? There's a due process. And as incoming freshmen or as members of the community, you're responsible for being educated about that process. So I'm sure you all will hear more about it, but that's a great synopsis, a really quick, idea about what happens in that scenario, or unfortunately, if you find yourself in that scenario.
Ryan, I just want to add that, of course, if there's a situation in all right to the student where the student feels that they are being incorrectly accused of something, there is a process where a student can say, I do not agree, and then it goes to a larger committee for review. Yep. So I do want to add that piece of it.
Yeah, like a due process, you would have representation from a student perspective as well. So absolutely. We actually have a question here from an audience member. Says, Dr. Eury, when working in a group project and one of your group members is really letting the group down by dropping the ball on whatever assignment it is, holding up a key deliverable as a group, being open and honest, would you have the other group members address the situation as a group, or would you advise that the one individual who felt this is going on privately do a one-on-one? Any thoughts on the best approach in terms of the group dynamics?
A great question. My hope is that, again, you've spent time as a group in the beginning, getting to know each other and sort of setting those ground rules. Assuming you've done that, meaning you've gotten to know your group members, human nature is you might have personality conflicts. You might gravitate more towards one person or another in the group where you feel like you kind of see eye to eye with. if you were that person with that student, you surely could have a conversation with that group member individually, privately. That said, my experience has been that when there is a group member that's not sort of holding up their end of the bargain here, it's usually not just one other group member that feels that or thinks that. And usually the other group members start to share and exchange those sentiments. So in that case, you can talk with your classmates there and decide the best course of action. And it may be you have a group conversation together. And again, not where you're singling out that person, you're making it all about them, but maybe you say, look, we're gonna have a meeting and we need to look at our contract again, our team pact again, because not all aspects are being upheld and we need a refresher. That's a slightly not direct way to deal with it, but that could be a starting point, right? There's gonna be different phases. Then after that, it might be a more direct point where it is one-on-one, or it is with the full group having a conversation. And at some point, although I always tell my students, I should be your last I should be your last point of contact here if you have a problem. I want you to try to work things out as a team, but I am happy to help you, is to have the team meet with the instructor, or have that particular student meet with the instructor. Sometimes I find out that the individual that's having problems with the group, there's other things going on that I know about that the rest of the class doesn't know about. So then I'll say, thank you so much for reaching out to me about this situation. I'm going to go ahead and follow up with that student. And then I can work with that student and figure out, how to help them be successful with that group.
Yeah, such a great question, such a great answer. I mean, group dynamics, all through your professional life, years to come, you'll be working in group dynamics and figuring out how to interact with group members and work through some difficult situations and act with integrity is such a valuable lesson to learn as soon as you can. I would 100% agree with everything you just mentioned. Another question here, say, a student is wondering about where they might get some more resources about integrity and ethics here at Penn State. Can you just give us a few more pointers on some support systems that might be in place at the university?
Sure. So I would say for sure, your faculty, your instructors are points of resources. Your student organization advisor can be a point of resource. Your academic advisor is another important resource. They're all sort of people who, again, assuming you've established rapport with, will be very willing and open to talk with you. And you will, again, feel more comfortable because you've already established a relationship with them. So the sooner you can start to put names and faces together, the better off you'll be. Outside of the sort of the people that you know and sort of going to someone more specifically here at Penn State, I would also add that at Penn State, we have a Penn State hotline, the Ethics and Compliance Hotline, which is anonymous. It's available 24/7. You can call or you can complete the online form. And with that, you can share any concerns that you might have, and again, continue to remain anonymous or stay in touch with a third party that you're talking to report the issue. Again, I would also add that your ethical role models are also important sounding boards. And as you progress here at Penn State, you will meet alumni, you will meet recruiters, people, your managers you have on an internship, and these people will be part of your personal and professional networks that you can also go to for advice and counsel when dealing with an ethical issue.
That's exactly correct. I mean, the hotline, all of the information, it's so great to have those resources here. Maybe I'll end with this question, and maybe just to kind of get your reaction. I saw the final questions that you had left for us and the audience, but from an instructor's perspective, I often hear students might say something to the effect of, I didn't want to be a snitch, blank, but now I'm in trouble. So what's the reaction? What are your suggestions so that students aren't having to say those words at some point in their career?
Yeah, so I mean, when we feel like we're having a problem, an ethical problem, it's a values conflict. And what you're describing here is the value of loyalty to your friends, for example, or to your group members or whoever it might be, and whatever the other issue is, which is typically, or the other value is, which is typically integrity. So for example, your friend asks you to borrow their homework problems because they ran out of time and didn't get to do it. And very clearly, the instructors made it very clear that you cannot share homework problems. And so you're torn, right? Like this is your best friend, or maybe it's your roommate. You may know that they're going through some difficult times and you feel this sense of loyalty to them. You don't want to let them down. And you also want to do the right thing. Or, something has happened, a couple of these people have cheated on an exam and you know about it, but you don't want to say something because you don't want to be that person, right? Or you want to do the right thing. So what do you do? The short answer is to think about the larger picture. Oftentimes when we think about an ethical situation, we think about it's you and me, but there's other stakeholders involved, other important people involved. And remember, you're a part of this community. And as part of the Penn State community, your responsibility is to uphold these shared values. And so are theirs, right? That's their values too. So good friends, don't let good friends do those types of things, right? If your friend has asked you to borrow their homework and they're really your friend, have a conversation with your friend, right? Think about it. If we can't have conversations with our friends about these things, how are you gonna have a conversation with your manager on your summer internship when you're dealing with a difficult situation? So practice now when frankly the stakes are much lower than they will be in the future. So think about the bigger picture, think about all the stakeholders and what's fair to people involved here, and go back to the values, your personal values, the organization's values, and stop and think about it. I mean, really, if everybody knew what you were thinking and going to do, what would the larger community say about this? Would you be proud to share this with your grandma or your parents, or your, whoever it might be? Would you be okay with that? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you figured it out. If the answer is no, then stop and think. There's something going on there.
Awesome. That is a great way, I think, here to end. So I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Eury, for agreeing to be part of our LionSide Chat network, for kicking off the first part of our 6-part series on the Penn State values. And hopefully, well, I know I did learn a lot of different information here about what to do in these different situations and to always, act with integrity. So I thank you very much for participating in our chat. A special thank you goes out to everybody else who is joining us today for our LionSide Chat. As you click out of our webinar, you will receive access to a survey. Please take a few minutes to complete that survey, give us some information, and let us know what your thoughts about today's chats are. We always are taking ideas for future chats as well. You're encouraged to reach out to us via email, and we remind you to keep checking our website. We continue to add new chats. You can see the next 3 in our 6-part series here are listed on our screen. Next Friday at 12 o'clock, we will be talking about discovery, really undergraduate research and what that looks like at Penn State Berks. So we'll be joined by a faculty member and several students who are doing discovery this summer. So be sure to come back soon, meet with other faculty, staff, students, to learn more about our exciting majors, experiences that you can have here at Penn State Berks. Stay safe, Berks and beyond. We are signing off until next time. This has been the Penn State Berks LionSide Chats. And thank you again, Dr. Eury.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.